Hello and welcome everyone. I am your host Stefan Burns. Getting started for you right away with a live stream on this magnitude 7.4 earthquake that just struck Japan. This is a big event. This is one that we've been forecasting. Now, the specific location is not something that I forecasted, but in terms of there's something big happening during this time frame, 17th of April through the 23rd, with 420 being the critical day. We had it. 7.4 right off the coast. Now a megaquake warning has been issued by Japanese seismologists and the officials there, because they don't play around, okay? Like other countries and other societies, cultures, they have more of a lax attitude. Often they have a lax attitude with earthquakes and kind of gaslighting, you could say. The Japanese don't mess around. They've investigated into all the things which some people may consider not necessarily like scientifically valid. For example, being able to forecast earthquakes with Schumann resonances, Earth's naturally resonant energy fields. Some people think that's pseudoscience because they haven't researched into it and they simply don't even know what they're really disproving. The Japanese have looked into all this. They have dozens, if not hundreds, of Schumann stations across Japan. They collect this data. They measure the strain accumulation on their faults. I mean, they are probably the world's best seismologist, bar none. I've worked with some Japanese seismologists, geophysicists. They know their stuff. They're not messing around. They have issued a megaquake warning now for the immediate future because of this magnitude 7.4 that struck today about 6 or 7, 8 hours ago, 35 kilometers down. It did generate a tsunami. Tsunami was not one that was especially destructive or anything like that, thankfully. So I guess some max heights that were recorded were about 80 centimeters. Which is, 0.8 meters, so 2.5 feet for those of you who use imperial. But in general, that's not really going to cause too much damage. It may cause some boats to kind of hit up against a pier or something like that. So it seems that as it relates to the tsunami threat, everything is okay. The biggest thing is the ground shaking. In Japan, they've designed their buildings and everything to generally withstand these sort of earthquakes, though in rural areas that can be a little bit different. But there's a bigger story here, which is A, the overall energy convergence, which I have been talking about at length. In fact, I first identified this period of time going back to January of this year. I did a post on X, January 29th, talking about this critical time window. Well, lo and behold, here we have our 7.4. We'll talk about that more later. Me identifying it, whatever. This could just be one event of many to occur because we're still in the critical time period. So it's possible, and we're seeing activity in other locations, like specifically the North American continent, Nevada, Utah. There's been some very interesting seismicity there that makes it look like there's some big kind of plate movements unfolding underneath the continent with the Farallon plate. We'll talk about that more. But we could very well have more significant events to unfold. We see many times in the geologic record that we have data for seismically, 50, 100 years, that it's not just one earthquake. Sometimes we get 2 or 3 big earthquakes in a day, this clustering. Often these seismic bursts are a little bit more spread out. It's over a few days. We are right now in this time period where we could have a seismic burst. We're already at very high levels right now because of the 7.4, but we could get more seismicity for the next week or so. And we'll talk about that. There's some space weather factors. We have a comet right now that just is perihelion, its closest approach to the sun. We can see that right here. This is Comet C2025 R3 PANSTARRS, image on the 18th of April by Joel Raymond and Michael Yeager out of Namibia. It has done its perihelion. Now it's coming in for its Sun-Comet-Earth alignment. We have this planetary alignment that's active right now. So we see Earth, Mercury, Mars, and Saturn all in a line. You'll notice Neptune fairly close to alignment as well as it relates to Earth. And you'll notice that Earth, Mars, Saturn, and Neptune all have basically identical tilt angles, only having a variation of 5 degrees, showing that there's a shared resonance between these planets, and them forming an alignment is very interesting. You will also notice right here, I layered in this solar storm hitting Mars because that started, we had 2 solar storms, big ones, launched directly to Mars. First one hit late on the 17th, the other one hit around yesterday, today, the 19th, 20th of April. And we've been in our own high-speed stream impact as a result of a giant coronal hole, which are well linked to earthquakes. So we've had this planetary alignment here active. At the same time, we've had a electromagnetic connection between Mars and Earth. And well, we saw this big event pop off here. And not only did we have an earthquake and a tsunami, there's also increasing volcanic activity. So we're seeing eruptions intensify here at Sakurajima, southern part of Japan, and they picked up volcanic tremor for the first time since December 2025 at Mount Tokachi. And specifically, if we go back to December 2025, well, that's when we had a magnitude 7.6 earthquake, which we were forecasting very closely here on the channel. We can see all the big earthquakes that struck Japan in November and December of 2025 because we had this sequence of magnitude 5s that started up in early November. That was anomalous. And I said, guys, something big could be coming. Like, this is the exact sort of activity that we see before significant events. Then we had a 6.4, 6.8 pop-off. You notice that this is the 9th of November. That rapid sequence to a 6.8 was troubling. Then we started seeing activity about a month later, and that's one solar rotation, by the way. Then we had this 7.6, there was a 6.7 aftershock. Now we have this 7.4 right here in between the locations of these events. This is cluster 1, cluster 2. Now we have this 7.4 there. So the past 6 months have been very active for Japan. We're seeing increasing volcanic activity, and now also volcanic tremor is back. So this is really, in my mind, showing that there is some larger geologic shifts that are unfolding in this part of the globe. Okay, so that's important to note. So hello and welcome everyone. I'm your host Stefan Burns, geologist, geophysicist, space weather guy, your cosmic bro, here to help you understand what is happening here on Earth energetically, consciously, and more. Happy 420. Thankfully, it seems everything is okay. So I'm glad that I can give this report without, let's say, like a heavy heart. But we do now have the risk of an even bigger quake to follow, elevated. It's not guaranteed. A forecast is a forecast, okay? It's not a prophecy. I'm not one to prophesize. I'm one to forecast and give you probabilities as to what could occur and hopefully get the highest probability to be the one that actually is what happens. So we're accurate. So in general, the megaquake risk is probably elevated. And by megaquake, I mean magnitude 8 or greater. Some definitions are magnitude 8.5 or greater. We typically get one magnitude 8 or greater earthquake every single year. It's about every 13 months or so, statistically. So it's about every single year. I would say the risk now of there being an imminent megaquake, magnitude 8 or greater, for Japan in this location for the next week is probably elevated 5%. Now, because of all the planetary geometry, the Sun, Comet, Earth alignment, and the space weather factors, maybe you bump that up to 10%. So as you can see, I'm not saying this is 80% guaranteed or anything like that, but normally the risk is very close to zero. So it is elevated quite a bit over normal. So a lot to talk about in today's video. Now, before we get into, I want to just share an announcement with you. I have a website. This is this is earthevolution.com. This is our store. My dad and I, we sell a variety of holistic wellness products, also merchandise and everything, as you can see here. And I just want to let you know that we put up a new product. This is our spirituality starter pack. And it comes with a spirituality tea as well as a quartz crystal. You can see that down here. A super optical clarity quartz crystal and a 4-inch white sage smudge stick. So this is available all for under 50 bucks. So you end up saving some money getting it bundled together. Just want to let you know this on the website now. And additionally, if you order a starter pack, you have a chance of receiving a sample of one of the other teas, because we've accumulated about 20, 30, 35 samples of tea, because we have all these different tea blends, as you can see here. And these are, for example, it may be like a festivity that's filled up with 2 ounces, or vitality or electricity with 3 ounces. It's not a full pack, but it can be anywhere in that like 2 to 4 ounce range. So if you order a spirituality starter pack, then you have a chance of getting one of these samples. My dad, when he's packing, he'll just randomly put them in, and it'll be a pretty good chance. So wanted to let you know that that is there, it's available, and it is, if you get that, you'll have that possibility of getting a sample pack from one of these other tea blends. Also an update, the quartz crystals here are now in a 5-pack. So you get to save a little bit more money by getting them bundled as 5 together. Before they were $18 each. Now it's a little less than 60 bucks for 5. And also the bug spray is back in stock. So if you want to get ready for this summer, this stuff's awesome. It's made by my friend Alohi on the Big Island of Hawaii. You know it's going to work if it works on the Big Island of Hawaii. It smells really nice. It's essential oils. It actually works. And it's not going to give you cancer or something. So it's actually probably going to make you live longer. So just wanted to give you an update on the website, the current promotion that we're offering right now. Thank you all so much for that. Here we see our global seismic activity level for the past 90 days. Okay? And so we see a magnitude 7.1 right here. This is back end of February effectively. Here's that global seismic burst that we were in, and this is primarily defined by this magnitude 7.5 that struck Tonga, 7.3 Vanuatu, 7.4 Indonesia. We did, just before this occurred, have a magnitude 6.1 hit Tonga. So that's important to note as well. And also, just 2 days ago, we had an anomalous surge of magnitude 5.0 to 5.9 earthquakes without a corresponding higher magnitude 6 or greater, which is typically what you see. So it is interesting that we saw this distributed global surge of moderate magnitude earthquake activity, magnitude 5.0, 5.9, about 2 or 3 standard deviations over normal. Very rare for that to occur. It's like once every 4,000 days or something, we get something like that. Based off of my statistical analysis, well, now we have this 7.4 that struck Japan, tsunami, and more. So that's our global seismic activity level. And also for anyone joining in, we will do a question and answer. So if you have a question that you would like answered, then you can type that in the chat during the Q&A. I'll take some questions from the general chat. Additionally, if you want your question answered, then you can ask it as a super thanks of any amount. That gets put in a separate list for me. I'll go through those and answer all of them, unless it's totally off the wall or I just can't make sense of it. I'll do my absolute best. So just letting you know that that option is there, but we will take some from the general chat. But because these videos and live streams are very busy, there's no guarantee your question will get answered unless you do the super thanks. That's just how things ended up working out. So thank you for that. We'll do that after the main report. Here we see our earthquakes for the past day. This is data from the USGS, and we see here it's been quite a lot of activity now around Japan because of this 7.4. This occurring at 7:53 a.m. Universal Time today, 4:20, at a depth of 35 kilometers. Thankfully, it was not more shallow, because if it was shallower, then it would really have probably generated a stronger tsunami. And in general, you're not really too concerned with tsunamis if it's magnitude 7.5 or less. In general, does not mean you can't get a big one. It depends on how the fault ruptures and the amount of uplift generated in things. But usually as it relates to big, troubling, destructive tsunamis, deadly tsunamis, you're probably looking at a magnitude 8 or greater. So thankfully this wasn't that big of a deal, it seems. We'll look at some footage. 35 kilometers down, and we see our aftershocks right here. 5.1, 5.6, 5.1, 5.0, 4.5. So considering this is a magnitude 7.4, we're looking at a probably mid to high magnitude 6 aftershock in the next week. And most likely within the next 48 hours, but it could even be up to a week after this event. And if I go back to Google Earth again, we see here that this is our 7.4 for today. Here's our 6.4, 6.8 location. We'll look at that data for November of last year. Here's our 7.6 for December of last year. It's forming a perfect line. So it's very interesting, A, to see that, and B, this entire area is clearly releasing a lot of stress and strain right now. And the question is this all preliminary foreshock activity or not? Because if it was to rupture with, let's say, a magnitude 8.5, which is very possible for Japan. They had the magnitude 9.1 back in March of 2011. We'll look at that data too. An 8.5 is certainly possible. I mean, they have legends and myths in Japan for hundreds of years because they get these sort of events all the time. It's like the most seismically active area on the planet, basically. I mean, they have the myth of Godzilla. They have the deep sea oarfish, doomsday fish myth and legend. So, like, this is something that's experienced quite often. This energy release from all these events would only be maybe 1/20th of a magnitude 8.5. So in terms of it actually releasing the energy for that event, it's not really like, and to therefore stop it from occurring, like, oh, it's releasing energy off the fault, so it's going to be less likely. That's not going to do anything. If it's only 5% of the total energy release of a magnitude 8.5, this is basically a warning rather than actually relieving pressure and making it less likely. If that is something to occur. Again, if it's just a magnitude 8, well then this 7.6, 7.4 and others actually are getting fairly close to energy release. Maybe it's like 1/50 energy release. So then, you know, but if it's a magnitude 8.5, well, different story. So that's important to note. And you would think maybe if you don't really know this stuff or you're just kind of new to this, you'd be like, okay, well, this is here, that's there, this swarm was there. Are they really that connected together? Well, the length of rupture for an earthquake depends on the magnitude. So for 7.6, let's say you're getting rupturing in this location, this 7.4 rupturing in this location, this 6.8 and 6.4 and others rupturing in this location. If let's say you had a magnitude 8.5, it would rupture this whole location because, again, it's so much more energy release. And the magnitude of an earthquake is pretty well connected to the length of the rupture. So, yeah, this could be indicative of that. And just because this location, that location, that location have ruptured with these higher magnitude events does not mean that we can't get a larger rupture to connect all of them together as a final kind of conclusion until stress and strain builds back up again. So yeah, Godzilla. Godzilla is coming. At some point, there will be a Godzilla event. That's the thing. Like, I mean, we have just an example of that. We hope it's not anytime soon. But we have Kakai volcano down here. I believe this is the location. It's one of these islands right off the coast. Maybe it's just further down. No, I think that's it right there. We have Kakai volcano. This is a really, it's almost a super volcano. It's not, but it's an ancient volcano, exploded like roughly 8,000 years ago or something. It's either 7,400 BC or 7,400 years before present. So it's like 8,000 years ago. Pyroclastic flows across the ocean and then ashfall all the way to modern day Tokyo from that. So we have these sort of forces that exist across the planet. Japan has a especially high concentration of them, but other locations do have them. I mean, just for example, New Zealand has some big volcanoes. Their alpine fault is well overdue. It's right up ready for a magnitude 8 megaquake. We had the largest eruption of the 21st century and really of 100 years, going back to 1906 with Tonga and the Hunga eruption, VEI 5, VEI 6, somewhere in that zone. I think it's like VEI 5.8 or so. There is Campi-Flegrei in Italy, which has been dramatically increasing in all of its measures of activity. This is earthquake activity, this is uplift, and also gas emissions. Exponential increase starting since 2020, so that is quite concerning. And if Campi-Flegrei actually did an eruption like it did roughly 35,000 years ago, where it laid down massive tuff deposits all across Italy, it could be very bad. So, you know, my channel, I'm not here just to be a catastrophist and just to freak people out all the time, because in the grand scheme, most people live their life without, you know, having something like that happen to them or volcanic winter. But as a geologist, you see that these things happen, and it's good to be aware of that, not to gaslight yourself into the fact, thinking that nothing ever happens on this planet, and to just in general be prepared for that. Because if you were to even take some basic precautions wherever you live for maybe something like a volcanic winter, which seems far-flung, but it's not, you'd be well ahead of the curve. And what does that even mean? It doesn't mean you have to have a completely off-grid, solar panel, whatever, everything, earth bunker set up. It just means that you maybe should buy like 50 pounds of dried beans and 50 pounds of dried rice, along with some freeze-dried vegetables or something, and have like a water filter or water source that you have on hand. And like a hand crank radio and some flashlights and batteries and stuff. Like ideally a little solar panel setup, EcoFloat, whatever. Like that's what I'm talking about. You can go all the way to the extreme if you want, but that's just in general basic, like be prepared, Scouts motto type deal. Okay. Let's talk about our solar factors really quick. Here we see the coronal hole on the sun that we've been having. Here's the follow-up. And this is very similar to last month where we had this big coronal hole, we had that one, and then there's a third one following up behind it. So long as that third one hasn't just completely diminished, that one's actually pretty large, larger than this one. So these coronal holes are very well linked to earthquakes. Case in point right now, because we have the 7.4, we're in this coronal hole high-speed stream. This is an area of the outermost atmosphere of the sun where there's a deficiency in plasma. The magnetic field is extending further out into space and connecting, therefore, more directly to the planets of the inner solar system. As a result of that, and this one's a negative polarity, meaning it can connect very nicely to Earth's magnetic field. As a result of that, I can eject this solar plasma very efficiently into our plastosphere, trigger a geomagnetic storm, and because it's a large coronal hole, it's wide, it's along the solar equator, meaning that we get embedded deeply within that stream, it dramatically changes the solar wind density around the planet. So there's a normal solar wind density that our planet has. When we're talking about the Earth and the factors on Earth, we really need to consider the outside environment. And just because something's low density doesn't mean it has no influence. It's high energy then, right? Very energized particles. When you have a complete ground change, like a massive change in the energy environment, and let's say the plasma density goes from 10 particles per cubic centimeter down to 0.1, that's a, what is that, 1,000 timing, or 100 times decrease, right? That's going to change the geology, you would think. And that's what we see. We see these coronal hole high-speed streams, when they are Earth-facing, too geoeffective, we get these big earthquakes. So that is what we just had, and we've been in a G2 geomagnetic storm. It's wrapping up now, but let me show you the data for that. Here we have it. Here is our G2 geomagnetic storm. We see that it ramped up pretty quickly as our velocity went up right there. So we were down in like just 300 kilometers per second, which is very, very low. Then we ramped up, got all the way to 550 or so. Now we're back up to 550. This is that high-speed stream. We see our solar wind density is actually a little bit more than I would expect. It's been hovering pretty strongly in this 2 to 3 range. This is particles per cubic centimeter. So that's not especially low. Usually the density is lower than that. And we see our magnetic field up here. So we see that spiked out all the way at 17 nanotesla. That's more than 3 times normal. Normal is 5 nanotesla. Negative 12 for the polarity, meaning it's strongly connected to Earth's magnetic field. See how that's perfectly lined up with when we had this G2 geostorm. This is our KP index, a measure of geomagnetic volatility, field swings on the planet. You know, magnetic field getting stronger then weaker really rapidly. It's concentrated near the poles of the planet, northern hemisphere, southern hemisphere. Well, at 5.67, that's a G2 minus storm. It goes to 9, that's an extreme storm. A G2 storm is a moderate storm. So it hasn't been crazy, but we did just have a moderate geomagnetic storm because we went up to G2 levels, kind of ebbed off a little bit, right back to G2 levels right here. That being yesterday at about 8 a.m. Universal Time in the morning. Then we ramped down, but we've kind of gone back up to active conditions as a result of this solar wind flipping negative once more, the velocity increasing again. And so we've been in more active geomagnetic conditions as a result of this space weather right as this earthquake has popped off. Now, let's talk about the tsunami a little bit. Here we can just kind of look through some videos of the tsunami for Japan. Doesn't seem like it was anything too dramatic, but yeah, I don't think we had those 3-meter waves. This video here just coming out right after that occurred. But yeah, tsunami warnings were issued primarily for these locations and then less so for the ones in yellow and blue. And if we go up, here we see some of these tsunami waves coming in, reduced to advisory only. So that is good that it wasn't a really big, super strong tsunami. But if there was to be a magnitude 8.5, again, I'd say like within the next, for the rest of the month, let's say, for the remainder of April, when we finally get out of this critical convergence period, I'd say the chance of there being a stronger earthquake, like magnitude 8 or greater, is 5 to 10%. It's not that high, but it's much higher than normal. I mean, I think even maybe 10% is too high. But at the same time, everything that's happening right now is pretty significant. So probably more like 5%. I'd say there's about a 5% risk of there being something bigger. So thankfully, it's not more than that. Thankfully, it's not more than that. Now, the other things to note here with Japan is that we've been seeing more activity from Sakurajima. We had an eruption here on the 18th, very border of the 18th, 19th. I think this is local time for Japan. Ash cloud going up to 2,300 meters. And this is just the latest in a string of activity from Sakurajima, southern part of the island. So it's been increasing in intensity. And it's the most active volcano in Japan. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't pay attention to it. Actually, it means that you should be paying attention to it because it is the most active volcano. So hopefully we don't get something bigger from that, but just right out of the gate, these seismic waves from big earthquakes, they influence these magma systems. All the plumbing, the conduits, all that stuff. For volcanoes, they get hit by that pressure wave quite strongly. The closer they are, the stronger that is, and that can influence volcanism. There's a long list historically of volcanic eruptions, like the biggest volcanic eruptions, have historical evidence for there being big earthquakes occurring just days, weeks, months, or even a couple years beforehand. And a lot of those records are from before we had clear seismic records from seismographs. So let's say like before the year 1900. But there's this historic precedent of people on the island of whatever in the Pacific, like, oh yeah, there was a huge earthquake in the year 1745, and then the eruption was 1747, that type of deal. So when we get these sort of big earthquakes, it often changes the volcanism for that location. And we saw that just last year with the magnitude 8.8 megaquake that struck struck Kamchatka, just to the north of Japan. All of a sudden the volcanoes really started to get active along the Kamchatka Peninsula, and they still are to this day. Krishenikov volcano, which is inactive for 600 years, started erupting immediately after that magnitude 8.8 megaquake. So that is something that I track very closely, the earthquake-volcanic connection. I don't see too much of a connection between the sun and volcanoes. It's more between the sun and earthquakes. Though I wouldn't be surprised if there's something there, but in terms of earthquake activity influencing volcanic activity, those two are super closely connected. So we're seeing more activity from Sakurajima that could continue to intensify, and also a report coming in from our friends in Japan, volcanic tremors at Tokachidake, alert level 1 continues. So last time they were picked up, and this is again, you see it right there, April 20th. So the last time we saw this was December of last year. So again, 4 months later, and well, we had that magnitude 7.6 in December. So this isn't the most pressing, everyone freak out type of news. That's not the point of my broadcast or anything. It's really just to help you understand what's happening with the Earth, to learn a little bit more about this amazing place that we live, how we're all interconnected together with the sun, the stars, cosmos, everything. But it is good to know that we are seeing activity like this across Japan. So magnitude 7.4 earthquake, there's now a megaquake forecast, low probability, but could happen, more likely than normal. And we're seeing increasing volcanic activity across Japan. And thankfully the tsunami that was generated was not that big. But there's a magnitude 8.5 that occurs in the same location, let's say a magnitude 8.5 occurs within this zone here, that would be, that tsunami would be destructive and deadly. Almost certainly, unless it was super deep. But if it was anywhere in the, let's say it was 20 kilometers down, yeah, that would be quite destructive and deadly. So here we see the activity back in November and December of 2025. And this is magnitude 6 or greater activity. So I didn't show any of the magnitude 5s, of which there's a bunch. So we see here the magnitude 6.8. And this is set for newest first. So let's actually flip this to oldest first. We had a 6.8 and then the 6.4. That's not a typical aftershock sequence. If you have a 6.8, you'd expect the strongest aftershock to be a 5.8, which is why I was issuing a forecast back in November of there's something bigger coming in this location, because that's odd. And then we see this magnitude 6. So 6.8, 6.46. Before all that, you had a swarm of magnitude 5s. Well, then a month later, we did get something bigger. As forecasted, right in the exact location, 7.6 here. That was on the 8th of December. Then we see a 6.0 earthquake aftershock, 6.6, 6.7. That's the more typical sequence, where this is effectively one magnitude less than the 7.6. So you have the 7.6, 6.7 decreasing down. But now you have this 7.4. Now if you go over back to 2011 March, this is set for the first 11 days of March, okay? we have our oldest earthquakes. We see that on the 9th of March, we had this 7.3. This is only magnitude 6 or greater. You can see that there's a lot of magnitude 6 plus earthquakes after that megaquake. We had a 7.3 on the 9th of March. This actually corresponded perfectly with a big solar flare from Earth facing. Very interesting. Japan being on the sunlit side. So Japan has a very interesting connection with the sun. We see time and time again that earthquakes in Japan line up and link up with solar activity, whether solar flares or these coronal hole high-speed stream impacts. Then we had 6.0, 6.0. This is again 2011, rumbling, 6.5. Okay, like what's happening, right? 9.1. 9.1. And look at the location here. This is all occurring south of where we've been seeing our current activity. And you see that it really filled in this area nicely. So if I go back to here, we see our lowest activity right here at the kind of the apex of that curve. And we see that our northernmost activity back in 2011 was right at that apex. So now we've been filling in this section up here. And here's our latest right there, right at that apex. So we could very well see a magnitude 8.5 occur in this zone. It's not overlapping with this zone of the magnitude 9.1. Now they are close together. You did have a big rupture across this entire zone for the 9.1 in general, but you didn't have the 9.1 right in this zone. You had it further south. So yeah. Quite a lot happening. Now there's other things happening on the globe too. So before we get to the Q&A, and hello and welcome everyone. I'm your host Stefan Burns. If you are new here, I'm a geologist, geophysicist. Also, I just call myself a space weather guy, your cosmic bro. Basically someone that has a degree in geology, worked as a geophysicist before I just really found myself wanting to learn more about everything that's happening. I wanted to effectively continue my education, but I just took it upon myself. So back in 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, just went crazy reading and researching into geology, geophysics, space weather, and the planets and more. Now I present on YouTube. Effectively, what I did back then is, as I learned things, I made videos I created video presentations on those topics to help me learn it and also to share that with others. And I've just continued doing this to this day. So that is a little bit about me. Here we see some activity for North America. Let's go to our 7-day view here. That might be too much, but here we go to our 7-day view, and we'll see all this activity here for Nevada, 5.7. We've talked about this. This is a big earthquake for Nevada. They had a 5.7 back in December 2024. For the rest of the 2020s, or actually for the rest of the 21st century, nothing. So quick back-to-back geologically within 2 years, 5.7 right in this location. You'll notice that if I click all magnitudes here, 326 earthquakes in this swarm. And yesterday we had that kind of reactivate with an aftershock, 4.7. Now that's a clear, perfect aftershock for a 5.7, being 1 magnitude less, roughly the same depth, and then we saw more earthquakes follow after that. So I'm not super concerned about this being a swarm indicative of something bigger coming for Nevada, though it's certainly possible. We'll talk about why. But it is following a very clear, predictable sequence of you have the main event, then you have the aftershocks. It is doing that. But the reason why I am a little concerned is because we're now seeing this earthquake swarm in Utah. Here we see 30 earthquakes now that popped off, 3.6 being the largest. So definitely quite a bit smaller than what we're seeing in Nevada, but here's why it's interesting. It's the location of the swarm. If we click that off, yeah. Okay, so you'll notice you have California here, you have Nevada, And this is the basin and range for the the western part of the United States. The classic basin and range, the Wild West, everything. You have a whole bunch of Horst and Graben here, where you have this extension and compression kind of counteracting each other, but mostly extension that's occurring, causing this landscape. You have this swarm right at the edge of the basin and range, western side. You have this swarm in Utah right at the eastern edge of that. This is a distinct geologic zone, okay? And now you have earthquake swarms exactly on both ends. And we know that there is an ancient plate that is subducting underneath North America. We have the Juan de Fuca plate up here. We have the Cocos plate down here. 80 million years ago, these were all one plate together known as the Farallon plate. And it was all off to shore and subducting underneath. And it's still subducting underneath North America because we see this is actually the same plate. Juan de Fuca, Cocos plate, they're not disconnected. If you look at it just from the surface, they are their own unique individual plates. But the moment you go below the surface, they are still connected together. And so you can see how vast that extent is. And in fact, the Juan de Fuca plate here, USGS has it mapped out to being about 480 kilometers below the surface right in this location. Now, these earthquakes did not occur at 500 kilometers down. This was 5 kilometers down. But we do see that plate subducting underneath, and the entire Farallon plate is going underneath all of the western part of the United States. So when we start to see a distinct geologic zone, the basin and range with earthquake swarms on both sides, that's something to take note of. Does not mean we're going to get a larger earthquake in this area, but it's certainly possible. Let's do a quick search of this zone. Let's go back to the year 1900. We're going to get a lot of events, but we'll filter them for magnitude 6 or greater. Because a lot of people think that for the United States, like California is the only area active seismically. In fact, Alaska is much more active seismically, of course. And, well, there's a lot of earthquakes, in fact, in the interior of the United States. So let's do this and just hit search on this bad boy. Boom. Boom shakalaka. Boom shakalaka. There we go. And we'll put on our satellite view. Make sure everything looks good here. Okay. So you can see that there's a lot of events that occur. Here is all the nuclear testing that they did. What a mistake that was. We're still dealing with all that radiative fallout and cancer and more. Millions and millions and millions of people killed early and or directly as a result of global nuclear testing by the powers at be in the 20th century. Don't forget that. It's the biggest cover-up that there is, effectively. And no one, it's all in the public, but no one talks about it. Here we see some big activity in California, but if we go over here, here's a 7.1, right? 1954, Fairview Peak, Nevada. Fairly close to, in fact, where we're looking with Silver Springs, because here's Silver Springs right here. We see a 6.4 that popped off near there in 1914. And this 7.1, you see it's further in the basin and range. Now, unlikely for us to get a big earthquake right in this zone because most of that strain is being accommodated by the extension. But we see along the edge here, here's a 6.6, 1901, 6.3, 1902. We go up here to Great Salt Lake. Magnitude 6.6, the 1934 Hansel Valley earthquake, that's 1934, and 6.1 there, 1975. So we can get these sort of big events to occur in this area, magnitude, even up to magnitude 7, that's a 7.1. So that's a shaker, folks, especially this location. It's not off the coast. It's like right there under your feet, shaking 12 kilometers down. So this is an area to watch as well. I don't think it's the highest likelihood that we get a magnitude 6 or greater in the immediate, let's say, month. But these earthquake swarms that we're having in Utah and Nevada are therefore make it worthy of closer examination. And yeah, the risk level is a little higher than normal. So there's that. That's important to keep in mind. Very important to keep in mind. So seismic activity level right now, very, very high. And that effectively is the update for today. We will do a question and answer now. Before that, let me show you the shaking from this earthquake, the 7.4 picked up by these seismic stations across North America. So we see Alaska and we see the US, some stations in Canada, not too many. But here we see the seismic waves propagating across. So of course that earthquake occurring all the way to Japan, but the energy does radiate across the entire globe. So the entire Earth right now, entire Earth was shaking from this event. And if we get something even bigger, that's an even bigger vibration. So crazy how we have this planetary alignment, the coronal hole high-speed stream, the comet at perihelion, just as forecasted. We had a big event, tsunami. We could have more other locations are possible. Maybe another follow-up in Tonga with an earthquake. We did that 6.1 yesterday. We're looking at the United States, as I just mentioned. I kind of always have an eye on New Zealand. I actually forgot to mention that we've been seeing more and more activity off the north coast of New Zealand, the Kermadec Trench. I have mentioned this before, but the latest update is that we still have lots of activity ongoing with this swarm here. So let me just show you really quickly. And here we see this earthquake swarm. Yeah, that's no joke, folks. In the Kermadec Trench. And the highest magnitude earthquake being a 6.0, 5.9, 5.4. That sort of distribution is what you see often before a big event. So we could be looking at a magnitude 7 or greater earthquake here just north of New Zealand in the Kermadec Trench imminently. I would say the critical time window for this is again to the end of the month. If this swarm doesn't die down though, then that pushes out further. But if we're just talking about the data we have right now at this moment in time and the convergence I've been talking about, end of the month is when I'd be concerned about this location having a magnitude 7 or greater. And I say magnitude 7 or greater, I don't think we would get this sort of swarm activity for just a 6.5 to be the main shock. Often it's that one magnitude jump. And see, the fact that we had a 6.0 and a 5.9 so closely together in magnitude, and then also follow-ups for 5.4, 5.3, 5.2, 5.2, that's really the sort of signatures that we look at for bigger events. So that is an area that could very well pop off. And again, we just had this 6.1 pop off in Tonga to the north. So, and earlier, if we go to our 30 days, all significant worldwide, we see our 7.5 Tonga, 7.3 Vanuatu, 7.4 Indonesia, 7.4 Japan. So now you can see how a magnitude 7 event or greater right here would perfectly fill all this in. Also, just in general because of that, I would say, potential for something to happen in Taiwan, because they get big magnitude 7s or greater at times, and also something around Papua New Guinea. These are just, kind of pinch points that often have activity. And when we get this sort of progression like this, it's important to pay attention. So yeah, let's get to our question and answer. So if you have a question, ask it. If you really want to answer it, ask it as a super thanks, and I will go through them. Next up for us, the next big thing is this Sun Comet Earth alignment. So that's the next big thing that we have coming up on the 25th, 26th of April. And that is a big alignment. We're going to see that effectively fly right in between us and the sun on our coronagraph view. And I wouldn't be surprised if you get like a big solar flare around that time, because we've seen that before. It changes the electromagnetic circuit of the sun in near space environment, and often triggers there to be kind of explosive eruptions on the sun if the sunspots are there. We'll have to wait and see if we get sunspots that are kind of lined up with it. If so, I would expect something big to occur there as it relates to a solar flare, like an X flare, something like that, high M-class flare, long duration, whatever. Hope you're all doing well. Happy Monday morning. And we have a question here from Boev. I'll get to the general chat soon as they start coming in. I'm from Bulgaria. We haven't had a magnitude 7 for 100 years. It's a long time. What do you think about the Istanbul and Marmara fault? Thank you. Well, in general, I'm not exactly sure what you mean by the Marmara fault. It's probably a smaller regional fault, maybe. I know the North Anatolia fault. So it is part of the North Anatolia fault system. Yeah, okay. And it's particularly near Istanbul, densely populated city. Wonderful place if you've ever been there. We've been having earthquakes propagate out across the North Anatolia fault to the west over the past 120 years. And now it's looking like the next rupture is going to be around Istanbul. So that's why Boev here is asking the question. Yeah, that's also an area to watch. It's going to probably happen within the next 10 years or so. Next 10, 20 years, we'll probably get that big earthquake to strike Istanbul. But we'll have to wait and see. Until we start to get preliminary activity, if we do, it's hard to forecast it, okay? That's really kind of the key, is seeing that preliminary swarm activity, which often precedes high magnitude events. That is that's the main thing you earthquake forecast. The planetary alignments, the space weather gives you critical periods of time to look at. So you have a greater sense of, okay, there's probably going to, like, probabilistically, something's more likely to happen during that time window. But then in terms of forecasting where it's likely to occur, you want to be looking at the swarm activity. And that doesn't always play out. For example, we right now have the swarm activity in the Kermadec Trench, but the 7.4 just randomly popped off in Japan. Now, it's not super random if you consider November and December of last year, but there wasn't some preliminary swarm for that 7.4. So it's very difficult. This sort of forecasting is very difficult. And to call the exact magnitude, exact time, exact location is almost impossible. But in terms of forecasting global earthquake trends of seismicity, key time windows, and getting a list of locations that are most likely, that's certainly possible. And we do it here all the time on the channel. So thanks for the super thanks. Thank you, Monica, for the kind words. And hello, Rosemary, from the big island of Hawaii. We got the Hawaiian water right here. Okay, good point. I'm glad you mentioned this. OSIDNI Falcon. What is the opposite point of Japan where it could be likely to also get hit by a strong earthquake? So antipodal earthquake activity is something that we have been tracking for a long time now because they happen time and time again. Like it's like clockwork. So let's type in Japan here on our antipode map, and we see it's fairly close to the actual epicenter for Japan. Now the thing with the antipode quakes is that they don't usually happen exactly on the opposite side. There is a deflection that occurs. So we use the term antipode just because they're roughly opposite. But we do have our solid inner core. My best idea is that there is a deflection around the solid inner core. And there's these vertical stress dynamics that exist through the planet. Because we see these antipodal quakes all the time where you get like a high magnitude earthquake here, and then right close to the antipode, a day later, 6 hours later, another high magnitude earthquake, similar magnitude. That's often the case. Often it's similar magnitude. So this location right here isn't really big in terms of, big faults or anything. We do have the mid-ocean ridge off to the side, the mid-Atlantic ridge. So we could see an earthquake mid-Atlantic ridge. We could also see, this would certainly be possible for that near antipode actually to line up with the subduction zone off the west coast of South America with the Andes. And we get big events there. We get magnitude 9 events here. The strongest earthquake on record is the 9.5 South America. So we could be looking at a higher magnitude event for South America as well in the immediate future. This is magnitude 6 to 7.4, I would say, because that's the magnitude of the Japan quake. And I would pin it more likely here than on the mid-ocean ridge on the other side over here. But if it is on the mid-ocean ridge, I'd say the risk of it being a high magnitude quake, it would be like a 6 to 6.5, maybe up to a 7. That would be really, it's very, like almost never do you get magnitude 7s on a mid-ocean ridge, but it is possible. And that's not really going to affect anyone. So we hope that's where it is. If there is going to be an antipodal quake, we hope it happens on this side, but I think it's more likely to occur along the subduction zone. So we'll see what happens. We hope that everything is fine, but we really can't know. Oh yeah, one other location too being mentioned, Drake Passage. We could see it shift to the south and hit Drake Passage. Now the more normal antipode location for that would be Kamchatka. And in 2025, we saw tons of activity with the quakes in Kamchatka, the Megaquake, the magnitude 6 and 7s, and magnitude 7 earthquakes happening down here. And they're going back and forth, literally like ding, 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 like pong, over the span of about 6 months. So that's possible, but it's a little bit outside the main zone. I wouldn't be too worried about that. I'd be more thinking about right here effectively, or the mid-ocean ridge. So we'll just have to wait and see. What are the chances of the Philippines getting hit by magnitude 6 or higher soon? Certainly possible. I mean, we just had a magnitude 6 or a magnitude 7 earthquake strike Indonesia last year. It was like a 7, it was a big one. 7 point something. I'd have to look it up. But that is certainly possible. Philippines are always quite busy. I wouldn't be, well, it's hard to say. I mean, the Ring of Fire is always very active. The fact that we had this 7.4 in Indonesia just to the south, and we did have a magnitude 7 point something hit the Philippines last year, kind of low. And actually, there was a lot of activity there as well, more than just that one earthquake. Kind of lowers the risk, the chances, I would say, but it's certainly possible. Those people just always are getting hit by storms, earthquakes, tsunamis. I mean, it's a wild place to live. It really is. You're living life on the edge there geologically. And a question from Tawoba, is New Madrid? Yeah, I mean, I'm not really too concerned about New Madrid. There's always a risk, okay? And yeah, at some point you're going to get some big earthquakes, but we're not seeing any activity that's having me like really zone in and like freak out effectively. But because of the history, because people live there, there's always people saying, New Madrid, New Madrid, New Madrid. And at some point it will happen. But thankfully, it doesn't seem to be a high risk factor right now. So that would be my answer to that. Let's get into some of these super thanks questions. Cowboys, thank you for the super thanks. Brandon with the thought, thank you for the super thanks as well. Luna Sparkle, thank you for that. And Katie, thank you for the super thanks. How is California with a big magnitude since the anniversary of the San Francisco earthquake? Yeah, if you don't know, it was just the 120-year anniversary of the magnitude 7.9 1906 earthquake. That was April 18th. And well, today's April 20th, so 120-year anniversary a couple days ago. That could happen at any time. All the faults are so overdue. We're talking about the Hayward fault, the Green Valley fault, the San Andreas fault, the Calaveras fault. That's North Bay. All of them looking pretty much prime. Even further down, the San Andreas, more around like San Luis Obispo, like that zone in general. That looks like it could rupture strongly sooner than, let's say, the North Bay, that area. But California is really difficult to forecast because it gets so stuck and muddied up and then it just suddenly ruptures. So we've been looking at it, checking out the preliminary activity, discussing the earthquakes in California. I'll continue to keep you guys up to date. But again, when it comes to forecasting earthquakes, I'm not going to lie to you and say you can forecast exactly to the date 20 years in advance or something. Like, get the fuck out, basically. You really have to be watching this daily in order to understand, or weekly, in order to get a sense and a feel and a rhythm for it, and then to be able to see when all of a sudden activity starts to build that, okay, now we should be worried. Maybe less worried, more prepared. But yeah, I'm not, I don't have any date set in stone. In 2 years, guys, the apocalypse is coming. Like, no, that's not at all what I'm about. Some people are. I think it's dumb. Thank you for the $2, Helio. The $2. Cleo, thank you for the super sticker. And Possibility Worker, typically when there's tsunami elsewhere, the north coast of California, Petrolia gets high waves or tsunami also. Why wouldn't it come this time? It's just a 7.4. And it didn't generate a big tsunami for Japan. So I think Petrolia will be fine. Probably not too concerned about there being any tsunami risk for California or Hawaii, right? So thank you for the super thanks. And have I checked the 524 planetary alignment? Let's check it out right now. Thank you, Nikki, for the super thanks. I'll load up solar system scope here. We'll see what it, you said April 24th. Okay. Well, we have, let me get this popped up for you guys. We have a Venus-Mars-Saturn-Neptune alignment, not the perfect alignment, but we still have it. And we have a Earth-Sun-Uranus alignment, roughly. I mean, I've really not seen too big of an alignment. Like, this isn't a critical. It's not too critical, I would say, honestly. I'm not really seeing anything that's too troubling to me. Not like right now. If we go to right now, for example, 420 blaze it. Okay, if you go to 420 today, here we see Saturn, Mars, Mercury, Earth, Neptune off to the side. Here is our Earth-Venus-Uranus alignment. Here is our Mercury-Jupiter alignment, and also that is involving Pluto pretty closely. We do have this Pluto-Venus-Jupiter alignment. We have this Venus-Saturn-Neptune alignment. That's what I'm talking about with these convergences. So The 24th of April doesn't really look, I mean, that is definitely an alignment. We'll have to wait and see. But Earth's not really doing too much here. That's the thing. There's not really too much action with Earth, so I wouldn't really be too concerned about it. So thank you for the super thanks. Appreciate that. And we have a drought. Is drought expected? We're going to have a very hot summer because of the super El Nino. So get ready for drought conditions. In general, I would say like expect drought conditions this year. That's what I'll say there. I think it's going to probably be hotter than most people expect. I mean, we just had 90 temperatures Fahrenheit in Pennsylvania in April. 90s, folks, in April in Pennsylvania. Nancy asking a good question. Why are more agencies, government not paying attention to the relation between space weather trends and their impact on global events like these quakes or other weather events? WX stands for weather. I don't know, honestly. I think it's a combination of factors. I think one of them is the fact that a lot of people have like a desk job. Let's say they work for the USGS. They have a desk job, they have emails coming in, they got paperwork, and they have whatever project they're working on, and they don't have time to sit here and track daily earthquake trends. And also, most people aren't multidisciplinary now, so maybe they know earthquakes. Like, for example, let's say I was to get a PhD in geology. I would learn a lot, but that PhD I would need to do obviously a dissertation for that and everything, a project. That would take me to one specific location where I'm tracking just the faulting in northwest China or something like that. You become an expert on that location. And certainly it's going to apply outwards a little bit, but a lot of people are super hyper specialized now. So they may be an ultimate expert on these faults in northwest China, but they're not going to know anything about space weather. So you got to kind of have a life situation where you're not really just answering meaningless emails and endless Zoom calls, where you can actually track this stuff, research into it. Every single day takes me to a new location to research, and as a result, I'm kind of all over the place. Now, I'm master of none, but definitely an expert in many. So, and I'm not the only person on the planet doing this, of course. There are other people doing this sort of work, but they're not really in these official agencies. And if you're not tracking it, you're not going to see it. And then there's also a lot of skepticism and denial of these sort of things, because if they didn't get it right, then it's not accurate or true, right? Because there's ego involved. So you can't get away from psychology of things. Also, people like to form tribes and camps. So if, for example, and I've done this before, I've said things about NASA and the USGS because I'm not just endless playboy for them, fanboy for them, where I think everything they do is amazing. I think they do a lot of amazing stuff. I'm glad to have all these data products, but there's been some weird things where volcanic activity and earthquake activity at Hawaii has suggested that bigger events could follow, and they were downplaying the risk. And well, just a few eruptions later at Kilauea, you have tephra falling all across Volcanoes National Park and surrounding neighborhoods and stuff. So they often downplay things. So if you go out and you say, you're not downplaying it because you want people to actually be prepared and aware, then maybe they look at you a little bit more critically because they're not a fan of that. And, some people don't like being called out and whatever, right? Criticism. So there's all the psychological stuff too. But data will prove it all in the end. The ability for people, for example, someone could take my channel, feed it into, let's say like Claude, and say generate a statistical report of identify all the time zones this gentleman has identified for there being significant events, give him a rating based off of how often he talked about it and the level of significance, whatever, and then what events followed up. Like, someone could do that and spit out a statistical report, and it would come up like, yeah, there's something here. So, and then data will win out. That's my thoughts on that. And super thanks here from Collective Ways. Thank you for that. Are SLC quakes caused by the Timpanogos fault or energy from coastal lines? I'm going to have to do a Google search because there's SLC quakes, Salt Lake City, and then Timpanogos fault. I don't know where that is. The Wasatch Mountains. Sounds like it would be American Fork River. Sounds like a Utah thing, yeah. So I don't know. But yeah, if there's a quake in Salt Lake City, it's going to be from one of those faults. Now, there is energy coming in from the West Coast at all times because of the compression and all the things I've described many times before. But yeah, it would be on a local fault there. So thanks for that. I'll look more into that whole area so I learn a little bit more about it. Exactly what I'm talking about, right? Thank you, Nikki, for the super thanks. And Eric, thank you for the super thanks. I appreciate your content. I live in the Himalayan belt, experienced 55 earthquakes this year only. Do solar flares affect this region? Yeah, so it's interesting that some locations seem to be affected by solar activity more than others. And I don't exactly know how to explain that. It seems to be where the ocean is. But it's just an observation. You know, just because you don't have an explanation doesn't invalidate an observation. Observations are what is. So I would have to look through the record and do maybe, you know, that'd be a research project for me, looking at periods of solar activity and then big earthquakes in the Himalayas. But the problem is that our solar activity record doesn't go that far back. And sunspots aren't that good of a measure for the sun-earthquake connection. It's really these coronal holes. And we don't have good data for that going back 100 plus years. And these earthquake reoccurrence rates are sometimes of that order and scale. You know, it's nice to look at data going from 1900 to now. That's 126 years. But we don't have that sort of space weather data. So I'll look into it. I can't give you a definitive answer right now, though. I personally just haven't seen that strong connection there yet. But it's certainly possible. So thank you for your super thanks. And what about the opposite side of the Pacific plate boundary at Cascadia? Cascadia is always something to watch. The recurrence interval there is about 250 years for the subduction zone. Right now, last big one, magnitude 9 is the estimate, 1700. We know that. So we are basically ready to rock and roll with the Cascadia subduction zone. We don't know when it'll happen. It could happen today. Could happen tomorrow. It could be big. Really big. And again, because that earthquake volcano connection, if Cascadia goes, I'm looking at Shasta, Rainier, Mount Hood, all the big volcanoes along the like Vancouver, British Columbia, Washington, Oregon, Northern California zone. All those could start to really wake up because that huge shock wave just causing them to finally do something. So we hope not, but as of right now, it's not my biggest area of concern. Someday it will just happen, though. Thank you, Justice, for the super sticker. Thank you again, Nikki. Paula, thank you for the super sticker. And Laura's asking, could it be unusually warm summer in Ireland? I don't know, possibly. I would have to do a look into the weather for Europe and the Gulf Stream and more, but general with super El Ninos, in general the Earth gets warmer, but there are areas that do experience cooling relative to baseline for a super El Nino. So I don't know if it's one of those locations. But I would say just in general, if your location has already been having heat waves this year in February, March, April, get ready for a hot summer. United States, huge heat wave in March. Heat waves right now in April. Like, it's probably going to get hot. So that would just be my default longer, more zoomed out perspective for weather trends. Julie, thank you for the very generous super sticker. Huge amount. So much love, namaste, God bless. And to everyone as well, your support helps, keep everything going. And we're at 705,000 subscribers right now, which is incredible. So never really thought we were going to get there when I started off, with 50 subscribers, and then getting to 1,000 was like a huge, huge journey. And now we've really made a tremendous impact across the world on a lot of people. And yeah, that's awesome. We're going to keep doing it. So that helps tremendously with some of the projects I have coming up. So thank you for that. The Despina, thanks for all the recent Cygnus updates. Affects me personally. She's talking about Cygnus X3, location and constellation Cygnus. That's a microquasar. It's been having these strong radio bursts or these strong radio flares in January and also in April. Also, I appreciate the earthquake and volcanoes updates more than any nuclear war. Yeah, we hope that doesn't happen, but these people in power are crazy. We need to get them out. So thank you for that. And Lauren, I wanted to ask what will happen next 10 to 15 years. We know that the Earth is already crumbling. Well, I'm not so pessimistic. I think we'll be fine. But my general long-term view going forward for the rest of the 21st century, because not only do I like to forecast the immediate and then like a year out, whatever, or for example, I said I was going to show you guys this. Let me show you here. Here is my update from January 29th. 420 this year will be lit. A new zone of critical planetary geometry has been identified. All the alignments, whatever, look for something big. After this post, I started talking about it more really in March, getting people ready for this. And well, today's 420 and boom, 7.4. So we do these sort of forecasts also a few months in advance when the clear, obvious thing presents itself. My longer term view is that as we go forward in the 21st century, we're going to continue to see Earth electrification. So until the Earth gets colder, it's going to continue getting hotter. We're right now on this upswing in global temperatures. Now, we could turn into a cold snap due to some maybe big event, because we're in an interglacial right now. But right now, the trend is that we're going to continue to get more energy held in due to a bunch of factors, greenhouse factors and more. And every degree that you go up in temperature, Celsius, for the planet, you hold 7 times more water vapor. That means more lightning, so more plasma, and overall, just the Earth is going to get more energized and electrified. As a result of that, stronger electric currents going through the surface, through the oceans, bigger earthquakes probably, stronger storms, category 5s are going to become very common. Like they already are happening earlier in the year. We just had category 5 Sinlaku in April strike Guam. That's really early, folks. It was right at the strongest it could have been based off of the sea surface temperature. The oceans have been warmer, could have been even bigger. So Hurricane Melissa last year, same thing, right at like the theoretical limit. We may have a category 6 coming up. So longer term, Earth electrification. Is the Earth crumbling? I don't personally think that. I think we'll get through this, but it means that we're in for a bit more of a bumpy ride going forward. I don't think we have a doomsday date that we can point at and say the world's going to end, like some people who say the world's going to end in like 2040 or something. These people are literally just fooling you to get your attention for the next 30 years to make you live in fear or something. Not about it. But I am all about forecasting and seeing where we are and being aware. And the whole process of this is an educational journey into not only the processes, Earth, Sun, stars, but also what's happening within. Thank you, Amanda, for the super thanks. That's awesome. Yes, Nikki, we looked at May 24th. Thank you. Christy. And my 13-year-old autistic nonverbal son with epilepsy has meltdown since April 2022. I directly correlate onset of episodes with uptick in solar wind conditions, arrival of shock waves from the co-rotating interaction regions. Do you know resources that can help? Not really. I know that GABA can help with epilepsy. I'm not a doctor, so I can't really give medical advice or anything, but you may want to look into GABA, because epilepsy and GABA are really well connected together. So keeping his GABA really high, I think it is maybe something that could help with that. But I hope everything is okay with you both. Hang in there. You're doing great. You're a great mama, and appreciate your super thanks. So here's another. I'm not verifying any of this, but maybe look into RSO, whatever that is. Grounding is really important, helping to balance the bioelectric system. All these things can help. So that is this is GABA, G-A-B-A, GABA. So that is your update for today, folks. 7.4 earthquake has struck Japan. We now have numerous aftershocks. We'll give it one last look right here before we move on. And we'll give this look right here. 7.4, we see our aftershocks, 5.6, 5.1, 5.1. Quite a lot of activity, but we are looking at probably a magnitude 6 or greater earthquake, like mid-magnitude 6 within the next few days. I'd be surprised if you don't get one by the end of April in this location, and also a higher risk than normal of there being a megaquake. I would say probably magnitude 8 or greater, but really I would say magnitude 8.5 or greater if it is to occur. My risk on that is about probably 5%. Thankfully not that high, but much more than normal. So other locations to watch down here, we could be getting a magnitude 7 to pop off with this swarm here. This is only showing a few of the events that have occurred. I showed that earlier in the video, of course. Weird activity here in the basin and range for North America, and because of the antipode, the rough antipode location for this could be along the mid-ocean ridge here in between Africa and South America, really this zone right here, but I think more likely actually we could get a big earthquake along the subduction zone here, west coast of South America. So that could be up to magnitude 7, 7.5 if that is to occur. We will have to wait and see. So thank you all, wishing you well, have a great day, enjoy your 420, and I will be back with more when there is more to report. Thank you and God bless.